So welcome everybody to the Magnetic Masculinity Podcast, where we help men with practical tools and strategies to bridge the gap between achievement and fulfillment so they can live a more conscious, magnetic, and fun life. And we are happy to welcome Tom Campbell back today. He is an amazing human being who is inspiring people all over the world. He's a former NASA scientist, physicist, the author of My Big Toe, and quite a popular name in news and self-help nowadays. And aside from that, the thing I always like to say about Tom too is he's just an amazing human who is here helping us raise the level of consciousness on this planet. And we're honored to have him back with us today, talking about sex and sexuality. And
thank you, Sandy.
Yeah. So something that a lot of men talk to me about that they struggle with, and I'd be curious about your perspective, is this shift that we're in from either shaming men for sex and telling them it's bad or wrong and making them embarrassed or not allowing them to express their sexuality, to swinging the pendulum over to what we would call them toxic masculinity and over-sexualization and over-objectifying women and using sex as sort of a replacement maybe for love, connection, and where do they find that sweet spot in there? What is sexuality and sex going to look like for men in this new higher level of consciousness that we are evolving into?
Okay, that's a very good question, and one that I think a lot of men struggle with. It's a complicated question, though, and that is that the third player in this game, besides the man and his mate or girlfriend or whatever, the third player in this game is our culture. Our culture comes with lots of rules, things to do, not to do, attitudes that are appropriate and attitudes that are not appropriate. And we have, starting in the 60s and 70s and 80s, it's not so much right now, but we had a surge of, shall we say, feminine awareness. We had a surge of the feminist culture that kind of bonded with our regular culture, and it became a part of our culture. And that was one of empowering women to get up and go and be all they could go and to kind of take charge of their life. And this was a good thing. Women needed to do those things. So it was a very good thing. But unfortunately, it turned into a gender war, male against female, the toxic male and the poor woman that was always being pushed down, by the men. And this got exaggerated, very much, I believe. And it started out as a very good and necessary part of the change in our lives, which are necessitated by the change in our environment. It used to be this environment was a very violent environment, and that it was important. Men protected women. Women mostly stayed at home taking care of children. Men went out into that dangerous world and did whatever they did and came back with the resources necessary to feed and clothe and take care of themselves, their wives, and their children. And that had been the mode we were in for 190,000 years. And it's just in the last eye blink of our species being on this planet that's changed dramatically. And when the environment changes, then the way you interact and who you are and your evolution is going to change as well. So we did need a big change to come about. But it was unfortunate that the feminist movement was called feminist movement and not the people movement or the human movement, so that it included both men and women, because they both had to make this change. And if they made it together, would have been so much better, rather than them blaming each other for their problems. So that then turned into this cultural, I don't know what I was going to say cultural mess, but that's not too nice. The culture that we have now.
A pendulum swing.
Yeah, it's a pendulum swing, right? So it went from men dominated everything and women were not paid much attention in the world, not given a whole lot of traction in fulfilling themselves, to the other side of the coin where, men were the enemy and, the women were the good people trying to make the world safe and wonderful. And the men were just always violent and oversexed and so on. So now we've had, I don't know, a couple of decades, 2 or 3 decades worth of the opposite, where men are very much on the defensive.
Yeah.
And they have been labeled as toxic. Yeah. They've been labeled as all they care about is sex.
Predators.
Yeah, predators. And all of that has then taken its toll.
Yeah.
And little boys in school, of course, because they're boys, tend to be more physical, more rowdy, more noisy, more trouble as far as sitting still, paying attention, and doing what they're told. That's not the way little boys are made. And then the teachers, being mostly female, said all these little boys are just too rambunctious, too much trouble, too disruptive. And some school systems even went so far as to put almost every boy on Ritalin, so that they were being drugged to be more docile and less trouble. And the idea was that little girls are nice and they pay attention and they're polite and quiet, and the little boys are disruptive and they need to act like little girls. They must be forced to act like little girls in the classroom. Yeah. So then instead of them being able to express their nature and be who they were told that it would be much better if they acted like girls, that girls were the way you should be. So you can imagine what that does to a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old and a 7 and an 8-year-old little boy. So we've now had decades of that kind of thinking, which fortunately is disappearing. It's, that hard over attitude of us versus them, us and our enemy, is kind of melting away. And I look at a lot of young people and I feel like it's very healthy, the things that I'm seeing. And so that's good. I think we've kind of passed through the big pendulum swing to the opposite side, and neither of those extremes is a good place to be. The men are in charge of everything. That's not so good. Women need to be able to find their place in the world as well and be welcomed there, and not welcomed there as trying to act and look like men, but welcomed there as women, as females. So they ought to be able to bring their femininity to the workplace, not dress up in a suit and pull their hair back real tight and try to be as manly as possible, but they should be invited to be women. And it should be bring their skills, their viewpoints, their attitudes, their way of seeing the world is a positive thing, and would make a lot of products a lot more friendlier to people. I think if the ladies had more say in, say, design and even engineering and all those things, that we'd get better products than if it's all a one-sided viewpoint. Women bring a viewpoint that's very valuable to the marketplace, and not just by acting like men, but by being women and letting those female attributes and feelings and attitudes help design and modify and create products. So we're not there yet. That pendulum has to finally get back to the middle ground where we do see everyone as a valuable contributor, to society. And we see that both male and female are wonderful, have wonderful attributes, and we appreciate both. And well, right now though, we're talking about men and their self-esteem and their problem with sexuality. Yeah. And all of this was just to say the third player is our culture. Yes. And our culture has created a lot of stress and a lot of dysfunction for both men and women. It's not just the men that are the are the ones that have found a dysfunctional culture, but the women also have a hard time. Let's say a hard time not feeling insecure. Our culture tends to create women who feel insecure. We give them, you should be, very sexy and attractive. You shouldn't be too sexy and attractive. You need to be feminine and, this. Oh, you need to be,
But not too feminine.
Yeah, but not too feminine.
And weak.
You really need to be more masculine and take charge at work. And, so we tell women, be this way, be the opposite of this way, do this, do that. And by the time they're done, they come out of our culture very insecure because the model for female is all in a jumble. The model for male is all in a jumble. Mm-hmm. It affects everybody. It's not just poor men, but it's poor men, poor women, poor everybody. This is a very hard time for couples to actually succeed in the kind of relationship that 500 years ago was perfectly normal and natural. Yeah. And now we're trying to discover that again. So yes, there's a difference in the male-female attitude. Yeah. The sexuality is a very big thing for men, very, important thing. The way we have evolved and the way that we actually succeeded as a species rather than going extinct is that men have an inclination to have sex with any woman who invites them and says yes, because that way they spread their genetic material as far and wide as they can. And women, they have a general attitude that they want a man that is strong and able to take care of them and who will help them and their children survive and succeed. And they have that as a very strong thing, but they need the man to make sure that they and their children survive. Now, I'm talking about instincts that generated over 200,000 years, and our culture only changed like 300 or 400 years ago, 500 years ago, say at the most. So we have these instincts inside of us, and though the man wants to spread his genetic material everywhere he can, the lady, she would also like to, she has a couple of things that's pushing her from an intuitive side. One of them, she needs to be taken care of so she and her children can survive. So she needs a man and she needs to keep him. So she wants that man to be attentive to her. And she's not likely to keep him for a long time because life was risky then. Men didn't live a long time. Women tended to outlive men probably by double the amount of time. There was a lot of fighting, a lot of warring, a lot of dangerous animals. You just get a scratch and you could die from infections. There were just lots of things that if you were out in the rough and tumble world, you didn't often last too long. I think the average age was something like 32 to 35 years old. That's about all people lived. They didn't get much older than that because life was just really difficult. So she had a husband, but she was looking for the best quality husband that she could find, the best quality sperm for her children. And in doing so, if she saw another man who looked pretty good and the husband wasn't around, she didn't mind going there either. Mm-hmm. And she would probably have 2 or 3 or 4 husbands because one would die, she'd get another, and so on. Some tribe would come in and kill all the men and over puberty boys because they would cause trouble, and they take all the women and the children. Now their tribe's bigger, so it's stronger. So she had a very insecure life, and dealing with insecurity is kind of part of what females do. That's that's one of their attributes, is that they live in a very insecure world. Mm-hmm. So both have a little push from their instincts to be monogamous. He'd like her to be monogamous because he doesn't want to spend his resources taking care of somebody else's children. She would like him to be monogamous because she needs to make sure that somebody's there who can take care of her and her children. Mm-hmm. But both of them don't mind straying from that monogamy as long as they can keep it a secret, as long as it doesn't create problems with the other. Mm-hmm. So neither one is particularly monogamous at the root. Both of them will stray, and mm-hmm. both of them will seek other partners. And the females often have to have kind of a guy, around in case the husband disappears. So they are nice and flirtatious with kind of all men, and particularly the men that they like, because the husband goes away, they're gonna need a backup in somebody else. So they tend to flirt and be attractive and make themselves alluring to men in general, because you never know when you might need another one. So all of these things are part of our instincts. It's the way we are inside at a deep level. And now we have a culture that tells us, most of that's wrong. You can't be that way. Mm-hmm. That's not a good way to be. So now we have a culture that pushes us to be other than the way we are, that punishes us for actually doing and being the way that's natural and feels right to us.
Causes shame.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of stress. It makes a lot of neuroses. People, feel that they are this way. They'd like to be this way. They'd like to be in this great relationship, but they can't act like that, and they can't act like this, and they can't be too sexual, but they have to be sexy and attractive, but not too much. But what's too much and what's not too much? And a man says, well, I want to take this woman and make her mine, but I can't be too forceful, because if I push, then I'm being a bully and taking advantage of her. And on the other hand, if I have to ask permission before I grab her and haul her off the bed, then I'm not acting like a man. So there's lots of that going on with both men and women. That's dysfunctional.
It's confusing.
It's confusing. They're kind of at war with their own instincts.
Yeah.
Because the culture does not support those instincts. So that's kind of at the root. If we look at the very root problem, we have kind of the natural man, the natural woman, and the way they are. Now, both men and women are very sexual creatures. So mm-hmm. Homo sapiens are very sexual creatures. Sexuality is a very big part of their life, a defining part of their life. And yet now our culture says, shh, keep that under wraps. That's you can't let that be too much of your life, because that just gets in the way. Mm-hmm. So that's a problem all by itself. Whereas that's not the way we're made. We're made to be sexual. That's why we're still here. All the rest of the hominids, including Neanderthal and 5 or 6, 7 other humanoids that walked around that we were all in competition with, they're all gone. And we survived for 2 reasons. One, instead of everybody doing everything, we specialized. The women specialized in babies, taking care of them, and working for both men and their babies. Men specialized in taking care of the women, taking care of the children, and making sure that they stayed fed and housed appropriately. So we switched. It wasn't everybody doing everything. The women were not out on the hunt while they were pregnant and taking care of children, obviously. So that allowed us to outdo most of the others, like Neanderthal, where the men and the women were more the same size. The men were a little bigger, but not by much. And everybody kind of did everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing that we did that made us survivable is that we were sexy. We had lots and lots of babies. Men, wanted sex all the time, and women loved the attention and the role of being wanted and being attractive. And the two of them just went together perfectly. The sexes weren't at war. They were not only at peace, but they were perfect matches for each other. And we just outbred all the other hominids. We had more children. And then eventually we had sex with the Neanderthals and some others too, and just overwhelmed them with numbers. So there were thousands of us and only tens of them. And pretty soon their DNA just got kind of spread across ours, and they disappeared, and we kind of subsumed them. And so that's how we humans, we Homo sapiens, kind of ended up as the dominant species, and the others all disappeared. We just outbred them because we were very sexually motivated. If you look at many of the apes and monkeys, many of the primates, you'll see that the females are only sexually receptive, 2 weeks out of the year, or 2 weeks every 6 months or something like that. They're not like the humans who are in heat 24/7. They're always available for sexuality. I don't mean that literally, but I mean, there is no time where sex is off the board.
So it's not just a short window every 6 months.
Yeah, it's not just a short window every 6 months, right? It's all the time. So we're a very sexy animal. And so that's just the way we are. And we need to accept that, and not only accept it, but cherish it, live with it. These are our instincts. We need to find those and be that, because if we get crossways with our instincts, it makes us neurotic. It makes us feel wrong. It's like, okay, I'm living this life, and I've got a wife, I've got 2.5 kids, I live in the suburbs, I make good money, but there's something missing from my life. The excitement, the romance, the connection, the joy isn't there. I get up, I get on a treadmill, and I stay on that treadmill all day, mostly even all night. And, life becomes a drag and a bore. And a lot of people are out there just getting by. The idea isn't to really find joy, it's to survive. Yeah. And that's too bad. That's really a sad thing. So men are sexually driven, and that is the way they're supposed to be. That's not a fault, that's a feature. So in our culture, it's become a fault. And then that causes a lot of difficulty. Women are also very sexual, and that's also a fault. Too sexual. If you're female, then you're a bad girl. You're not the demure little wife that we put up on the pedestal, that the wife and mother who does everything right and serves everyone, but gets nothing but dirty dishes. And that's all she earns is more work. So we kind of have that idea, which creates a lot of people feeling self-centered. It gets more about them. As people get dislocated from their instincts and from who they are, they start feeling wrong, start feeling things aren't right. There's something wrong here. I'm not satisfied. I'm not happy. Yes, I've got all the things I'm supposed to have, but it's just not working to make me happy.
They don't feel fulfilled. They've checked all the boxes, but they still feel lonely and disconnected and unfulfilled.
Exactly. So that's the basis. That's the basic ground that we're working from. And that's a big part of the problem. Is the culture we live in is very dysfunctional for males and females, both being themselves. So now more specifically to the men, the men may have instincts to have sex with every woman who will say yes, but they also have a responsibility as well. So it's not all one-sided. So yes, that that is the way men feel. They look at a pretty woman and they can imagine having sex with that woman within seconds, and that's just the thought they have in their head. But they also have responsibilities. Mm-hmm. They have people to take care of, children to raise, a job to do. They have things that they have to do, and they have to have that sense of who they are, what their responsibilities are, and temper their instincts with their sense of responsibility and caring and that sort of thing. So it's not just that people are wild people who do nothing but, live out their instincts. No, it's not that way. Mm-hmm. People, males and females, both also, by having a little head, have big heads, and they're supposed to think with those big heads, and they're supposed to make good choices, low entropy choices that are the best thing for everybody. So we have both of those things. Yes, you have instincts, and no, you shouldn't squash those instincts and call them bad or evil or nasty. You need to accept them and deal with them, but you need to deal with them within the context of being caring, being responsible, being being helpful.
And accountable, maybe.
And accountable. Yes, that's a good thing too. Accountable for your choices and the things that you do. Yeah. So this is kind of the right, healthy attitude. All right, I have instincts. This is the way I feel. Pretty girl walks by. I can't help but watch her walk by. And I can't help but think, at least even for a few seconds, what it would be like to be making love to that girl. But that doesn't mean that you get up and and grab hold of the girl. That's not a good idea. Yeah. You need to temper those instincts with, yes, accountability, caring. You have a family, you have things you have to take care of, and that's important too. And the thing is, it's not an either or. Either you're responsible or you satisfy your instincts. It's not an either or. You can get all of that. There's room for all of that within a healthy relationship. Yeah. But you can't take any part of it and disown it, because if you do, then you create trouble. You have to own the whole package, and then you have to live your life in a way that honors all of you, how you are and your relationships. And if you do that, that's when you actually can find joy and peace and satisfaction within a stable relationship that is just wonderful. All of that fits together so nicely. So yes, we can talk about how men are and how women are and what that means and in the context of our culture. But when it comes down to it, we are who we are, and we need to be responsible, accountable. We need to think about other people and how we affect those other people. And in that spirit of caring, our lives will naturally adjust of where we are, things we do, who we have relationships with, what those relationships look like. And in my viewpoint, what's important between a couple, between a male and female, is what I call unconditional love. And this unconditional love simply means there's no conditions. You just love. And if it gets to a point where you don't want to be together anymore, well, then you separate. And if it's just one person doesn't want to be there anymore, well, the other person says, well, I love you. I'd like you to optimize your life. So good luck. And I wish you well, and that instead of saying, oh, woe is me, now what am I going to do? You say, oh, I guess there's a new adventure waiting for me. I'm going to go out and, start getting back into circulation and see what happens. And my life has another whole phase to it that hasn't been written, another chapter that I get to write. So everybody stays positive. Relationships come and go as people change and situations change, and that's okay. So it's not a throw it away because somebody new came by and caught my fancy. It's not that. Yes, accountability, responsibility, making low entropy choices, and realizing that if two people aren't getting along and they're not having fun and there's no joy in the relationship, then to just continue it because that's what you do and that's easy is a cop-out.
Because you have a piece of paper that says that's what you have to do.
Yes. And that's unfortunate. Then our culture says, no, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, you have to do the other thing. And then people start living lives of dysfunction. Yeah. And as they do that, that dysfunction grows and gets harder and harder and harder. And then you got two people who are not happy, who are miserable with each other. And, 10 or 20 years ago, they maybe should have gone on their own ways and they'd both be happier now. So this idea of unconditional love really optimizes both persons' potential. And it does it in a way that is very positive for both people. It's taking responsibility, for yourself and for your commitments to others. Now, I don't say that every time a couple has trouble, they should separate and go find other people. No. They should find out what the trouble is, because most of the time they'll find at least half of the trouble is themselves, almost always, and they need to work on that. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, relationships take a lot of work and effort, but it's a work of love. It's a work of caring if both people are trying to be what the other needs. Because you love other, you want that other to be happy, and you try to be whatever you need to be to make that person happy because you love them. So in that case, the relationship is such that, it's not like you're married, you're going to be married forever. So, now get on with your life. It's like every day I have to earn my mate's love every day, because if I don't, he or she may find something better that's better for them elsewhere. So instead of I'm married, okay, I can stop trying to be nice now. I can stop with the trying to be on my best like I was when we first met. Everybody's trying to be what the other person needs then, but then after a while, you're just trying to be what you need.
It's being inauthentic. Yeah. Or false advertising almost.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have the feeling that when I am not what that person needs, then that person should actually go someplace else. And I should too. So every day you have to be so that person wants to come home to you, not because they feel obligated to come home to you. Yeah. If they come home to you because it's an obligation, that's not a good relationship. Yeah. Oh, we're married, I have to do this. But if they come home to you because that's where they want to be with you, and that's why they come home. Now that relationship has potential. That relationship is a good relationship. And when it's no longer a good relationship and it can't be fixed, they try and it doesn't work because not either one of them are really trying that hard. They want the other one to change. They don't want to change. They want the other one to change. Then it's kind of lived its life, and you ought to grow from it, learn from the mistakes you made, and go try again. So that's the unconditional love. It's just love with no conditions to it. You just love somebody, which means you want to make them happy. Yeah. You want them to be happy, and whether that's with you or without you, if it makes them happy, you're happy for them to do that. So, of course, you have to be kind of a special person to do that. You can't be that way and be self-centered. So anyway, that's kind of where we should be. Now, what about men today? All right, they have this.
But we're not there yet. Let's be real. Most people, I often get people that come to me in relationships, or one of the couple comes to me and they've been taught, there's a paradigm of thought in society that prioritizing the integrity of the marriage should come before caring about the happiness of the two people in the marriage. I'm here to protect the marriage. But when we break marriage down, shouldn't it be 1 + 1 = 10? Not you have to be together because you possess a contract to that person that, regardless of whether you're still happy or still aligned, or the idea that a man should stay, or a woman either should stay, or anybody on any gender spectrum should stay in a relationship because they made that commitment, rather than honoring their commitment to love and happiness and authentic or kindness, or whatever their commitments to as a being of consciousness are.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the way it is. If you truly love that person and they think they'll be happy in some other situation, you want them to take that other situation because you love them and you want them to be happy. And if it's not that way, if you're self-centered, yeah, but what am I going to do? And you're going to leave me out. And what about me? Well, that's just self-centeredness. And that is maybe part of the reason why the relationship's not working. Yeah. So if it's really about love, then love is always just, it's not a requirement to do this and be this way or be that way. Yeah. Love is about other. Unconditional love is the only kind of love there is. Conditional love is not love. It's a deal. It's a bargain. But, again, we're not talking about irresponsible people who are self-centered. We're talking about people who are trying their best to grow up and to be what they need to be and find happiness and so on. So anyway, that works out. So we have this problem now that I've tried to define, like, what the big picture problem is. It's
how we got here.
It's an attitude. Yeah. It's all of this stuff that has happened, and now we have to live here. Okay, we made this bed. We got to lie down in it, and it's not too comfortable.
Yeah.
So men, yes, are sexual creatures. So are women, for that matter. Although women tend to push that down further into their subconscious. Men, it kind of bubbles more up onto the surface. But for women these days, they tend to suppress it. I think less for the younger people. They seem to be.
They're more open. They're a little more tuned in, I think. And women, I think
so too,
have either suppressed it or had to use it because women are growing up in not an authentic masculine society, but an unhelpful old paradigm of masculinity that we would refer to as patriarchy, where women, even the femininity or sexuality in itself was sort of masculine. It wasn't about love and acceptance and an authentic expression of any gender. And I think that we really need to redefine that for both genders or any gender, as we evolve out of the emotional dark ages and into more conscious loving and conscious sex. And again, we have that paradigm swing where men have been told not to be a predator and not to be assertive sexually, or told sex is bad, sex is wrong. And what I see a lot in relationships is men see if you have a different perspective. The perspective that I have gathered so far is that there's almost a little joke from the LCS or source, whatever people refer to consciousness as, that women need to feel safe to feel sexually turned on and engaged and wanting to engage in sex. And men need sex to feel safe and engaged. So it's almost this, and in this society we've created, women don't feel safe emotionally. They don't feel safe mentally often, maybe even physically or financially, whatever it is. And the more men try to get sex, if the woman doesn't feel safe, the more the woman pulls away, and the more woman pulls away, the more it sort of becomes, it's like this paradoxical dance between men and women. And again, acknowledging that we're very much gender stereotyping. So we are putting people in two boxes. I just want to acknowledge that, or we're going to see it in the comments. We're generalizing for the sake of metaphorical alignment. But it's this sort of, men need this to feel safe, and women need to feel safe to want to have sex. And neither gender is thriving in this current patriarchal paradigm.
Yes. And, if you go back just, 200 years or so, I'll say back even in the Victorian era, where everybody was at least supposed to be very prim and proper, you'd find out that there was like two different worlds that you lived in. One was the world of propriety, where you did what what the culture told you was correct. And then there was the real world that ran on behind that. And everybody was engaged in having affairs, and the sex and the love and the life and the sexuality that was going on behind the scenes, in secret supposedly, but it was a secret that everybody knew. And that's how they dealt with this problem of the culture requiring us to be a certain way when we're really not that way. Well, we pretend to act like the way the culture is, but you can, back in that time, if you read a lot of stories that are set 200, 300 years ago, you realize having affairs, having sexual encounters and so on outside the marriage was just about as common as breathing. It was it was even expected. Mm-hmm. Of course, my husband's having affairs and having sex with other people. Don't all husbands? It was that sort of thing. And the wives did too. They were just more secretive about it, but they acted that way. Now, we don't do that now. We see the hypocrisy in that, and we have a hard time going there, living dual lives, which is good. Hypocrisy is a bad thing, but that's the way the same problems got solved 200, 300, 400 years ago. Well, we don't do that anymore. We're more aware of that hypocrisy. It isn't right. The culture is more demanding that we do it their way. But yes, we have this dichotomy where what the men need, they don't get. What the women need, they don't get. And so the two of them just live together because that's better than living apart. But it's not as good and wonderful and superb and sublime, and all the things that it's supposed to be just don't seem to be there, almost to the point that people start to think that that's impossible. All that romantic stuff is just a fiction, and you shouldn't expect that. And then that takes both sexes tend to retreat into that, well, I guess that's just the way life is. And the fulfillment, the joy, and the rest of it is just impossible. It just doesn't work. They don't see the problem in themselves. They only see the problem in others. So the men thinking, those women are just not as sexual as they should be. And the women see the men as they just don't have they just don't present themselves in a way that turns me on or that gets me excited or that satisfies me. They treat me, in ways that make it difficult for me to be what they want. So either one really see the problem of themselves. They see just the problem in other. So it's just something we're going to have to outgrow. But we talk about the problems that men have and the issues that they deal with today. And we could probably talk just as long and just as much detail the problems women have and the issues that they're dealing with today. And dealing with these issues is very important, but it needs to be both males and females need to grow into this new awareness of being authentic and being real and being who they are and not being who they think they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And that, I think, would work out reasonably well if both communicated, if both the males and the females talked about how they really feel. One of the problems with that is most of yes, that's what I was just going to say.
That requires self-awareness, and self-awareness is a scarce commodity right now on the planet because we've confused fitting in with love and belonging. So we're all trying to be, or humans are trying to be what they think the other person needs them to be in order to receive love. And it's just sort of becomes a dance of manipulation and disappointed expectation.
Exactly. So if we could communicate, that would be good, but we can't communicate. It's and
we can't communicate what we won't look at in ourselves either. Like when I ask men, what are your authentic wants? What are your desires? What are your needs? And how do you communicate them? Most of them look at me blankly like, I don't know. I'm like, well, how do you expect her to meet needs you don't even know and that you haven't communicated, nor have you assessed if that's something she would enjoy doing for you?
Yes, it's something that both males and females will need to grow up with better, more open, more authentic attitudes. And hopefully that's happening now. Maybe not, but it seems like it's off to a much better start than I've seen for 5 decades.
Yeah.
So it does seem very, very encouraging anyway, that men have started to just kind of be themselves, and women also just kind of be themselves and kind of start over and tell the culture to go pound sand. This idea that the culture can tell me how I need to be and what I need to do and what I should feel and what I shouldn't feel, and like just let that go. And I think the young people are doing that much better than, say, the generation before them or the generation before that. So that's the good sign. But they're both going to have to evolve together. It's not like the men need to do this and the women need to do that. That isn't going to work. The men and women need to do this together. And they can only do that if they communicate, if they toss the cultural's demands into the trash can and just be real, be authentic people, and talk about who they are and talk about what they like, what they dislike, what they need to feel. And if they could have that conversation, then I think in a generation or two, you'd probably see a lot of progress. But usually evolution takes time, particularly when the culture has evolved itself into a corner like this. They've kind of painted themselves into a corner where it's very difficult to get out of. We'll get out of it. It'll work out. But meanwhile, you have a lot of frustrated men and a lot of frustrated women. And in as much as they see each other as the problem, that keeps the problem going. That just makes the problem, pass it on to the next generation. You show your children the problems without showing them any solutions, and then the next generation has to, will live through that same set of problems. So what about men and their issues? Well, they're fundamentally very sexual, and they don't find women to be fundamentally very sexual. And like you say, women can't be fundamentally very sexual unless they get the right vibe and the right actions and the right attitudes from the men before they can really be that sexual. And it's not the attitude of take and gimme and I want. That's not the attitude that helps. That's the attitude that turns women off, not turns women on. So it's got to be a slow process.